The house stood quiet under the Iowa sky. It was the kind of small-town quiet that felt permanent. Wooden homes lined the streets. Front porches faced one another like open invitations. Neighbors knew each other's names, habits, and routines. Nothing happened in Villisca without someone hearing about it. That is what makes what happened inside that white frame house so disturbing. Because something did happen. And no one heard it. On the evening of June 9th, 1912, the Moore family returned home from church. It was a warm Sunday night. The air carried that early summer stillness. Inside the house were Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and little Paul, 2 young girls, Lena Stillinger and Ina Stillinger, and were spending the night after attending Children's Day services at the Presbyterian Church. 8 people under one roof. By morning, all 8 would be dead. The house itself was modest, 2 stories, narrow staircase, bedrooms tucked beneath a slanted roof upstairs, a small guest room downstairs. Sometime after midnight, someone entered that house. There were no signs of forced entry. The killer likely waited inside. That is what chills investigators even now. The idea that someone could have hidden in the shadows as the family returned home, climbed into bed, and drifted into sleep. Imagine it. Footsteps barely audible, breath controlled, patience stretched across hours. The first victims were Josiah and Sarah Moore. They were attacked in their bed. The weapon, an axe found inside the house, Josiah's own axe. But the blows were brutal, overkill, the kind of violence that suggests fury or something colder. After killing the parents, the murderer moved to the children's room, one by one. Each child struck while asleep, then downstairs. The 2 Stillinger girls. 8 victims in total. The killings were not rushed, and this is where the story grows darker. After the murders, the killer covered each victim's face with clothing or bed linens. He placed mirrors face down in the house. He covered windows. He prepared a meal in the kitchen. He washed his hands. He stayed. That detail has never left the minds of those who study this case. The killer did not flee in panic. He lingered. The bodies were discovered the next morning when a neighbor, Mary Peckham, noticed the Moore family hadn't begun their usual Monday routine. The chickens weren't fed. The house was silent. Concern turned into unease. When Josiah's brother Ross Moore entered the home, he found what no small town ever expects to find. Word spread fast. Within hours, crowds gathered outside the house. And here is one of the greatest investigative failures of the case. People walked through the crime scene, neighbors, townspeople, curious onlookers. Evidence was contaminated almost immediately. Fingerprints were smudged, footprints disturbed. The crime scene became a spectacle, and the killer slipped into legend. There were suspects, many of them. Frank Jones, a prominent local businessman, had a rivalry with Josiah Moore. Business disagreements, political tension. Some believed jealousy played a role. Then there was Reverend George Kelly. He was an English immigrant minister who had stayed in town the night of the murders. Kelly had a history of mental instability. He was obsessed with the crime. He attended the funeral. He sent strange letters to investigators. Under intense interrogation, he eventually confessed, but the confession was inconsistent. He recanted, and despite a trial, he was acquitted. No one was ever convicted, but the brutality of the murders didn't end the mystery. Because across the Midwest, similar axe murders began appearing. Entire families killed in their sleep. Windows covered, faces concealed, axes left at the scene. Some believe a serial killer traveled by train across small towns, targeting families near railway lines. The Villisca house sat just blocks from the tracks. Was this the work of one roaming predator? Or was it personal? The methodical nature of the crime suggests planning. The intimacy suggests familiarity. Yet nothing was stolen, no valuables taken, no clear motive. And that is what keeps this case alive, because motive anchors a crime in reason. Without it, the act floats in something far more unsettling. Randomness. Over time, the Villisca Axe Murders became more than a crime. They became folklore. The house still stands today. Visitors walk its narrow staircase. They step into the children's bedroom. They stand where the axe once fell. Some claim the house is haunted, but the true haunting is not supernatural. It is historical. It is the knowledge that 8 people were slaughtered in silence while a town slept peacefully around them. The investigation dragged on for years. Accusations tore the town apart. Friends turned against friends. Rumors spread. Trust fractured. Because when evil strikes without explanation, people need someone to blame. And when no one is caught, suspicion becomes a poison. Think about that night. The stillness. The way the killer moved room to room. The decision to cover the faces. Was it remorse? Was it ritual? Or was it something else entirely? Investigators found a slab of bacon left at the crime scene, a plate of food, partially eaten. What kind of person commits such violence, then calmly prepares a snack? Psychologists today might suggest psychopathy, dissociation, compulsion. But in 1912, there were no behavioral profilers. There was only fear and confusion. Over a century later, forensic techniques have improved, but evidence was lost, contaminated, destroyed by time. Much of the case remains officially unsolved, which leaves us with the most uncomfortable possibility of all. The killer was never caught. He may have lived out his life quietly, married, had children, worked a job, attended church, and no one ever knew. That thought unsettles people more than ghosts ever could, because monsters are easier to handle when they look like monsters. The Villisca killer looked like anyone. The house has become a destination for investigators, historians, and thrill seekers. But beyond the tourism, beyond the eerie fascination, lies something heavier. 8 lives ended violently, 4 of them children. An entire family erased in one night. And justice never arrived. When we look back at crimes like this, we often search for patterns. We want resolution, closure. But sometimes history refuses to give us that. Sometimes stories remain buried not because they are forgotten, but because they are incomplete. The Villisca Axe Murders are not terrifying because of blood. They are terrifying because of silence. No screams heard, no witnesses, no capture. Just a house that went dark one night and never fully recovered. And maybe that's why the story survives, because it reminds us that evil does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it moves quietly, patiently, in the shadows of ordinary life, and by the time anyone notices, it's too late. If the story gripped you, if you felt the weight of that silent house in 1912, then make sure you like this video, share it with someone who is drawn to history's darkest mysteries, and subscribe to Stories Buried in Time for more true events that history never fully explained, because some stories were never meant to disappear. They were only waiting to be uncovered again.